Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Here's a story that doesn't begin with a meet-cute, or a wedding, or even a fight. It was 7:42 p.m. when I signed the bill and left the restaurant. I remember the exact time because I checked my watch 3 times, not because I was in a hurry, but because I needed to be sure I was still real. My name's Milo. I'm not going to pretend I'm anything special. I'm the guy who holds doors open, apologizes when it rains, and tips 25% even when the service is bad. I've spent most of my life trying to be the kind of man women say they want, only to be told I'm too nice or safe, or, my personal favorite, just not exciting. But that night taught me that being safe doesn't protect you from being destroyed. We weren't fighting. There was no tension in the air, no dramatic build-up. She had ordered the salmon. I had the steak. We shared a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce. We even laughed at something the waiter said. Then, as casually as reading a weather forecast, she set her fork down, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're not my type, Milo. Never have been." No smirk, no shame, no hesitation. Just detachment. I blinked, thought I misheard, tried to swallow, but my throat turned to gravel. "Excuse me." She leaned back, arms crossed, and added, "You're good for a meal, for quiet weekends, for safe plans. But I need more." I could feel the color draining from my face. And not because she said it, but because I already knew. I had known for months, maybe years. She had stopped touching me with intent, stopped asking about my day, stopped looking at me during dinners like this one. But I ignored the signs. Because sometimes it's easier to live in the comfort of denial than face the humiliation of truth. I nodded, reached for my wallet, signed the check. And just before I stood up, I asked, "Is there someone else?" She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any confession. I walked out of that restaurant with nothing but a jacket and a jaw clenched tight enough to break bone. But what I didn't know then was that this wasn't just the end of a dinner. It was the beginning of an avalanche. Because within 48 hours, I would discover a hidden bank transfer, a second phone, and a birthday party I was never meant to see. And that's where everything truly collapsed. The walk home that night didn't feel like walking. It felt like floating through fog. Streetlights passed me like ghosts, and the city was loud, but all I heard was her voice. "You're not my type." It echoed with every step, louder than traffic, sharper than glass. I don't even remember how I unlocked my door or kicked off my shoes. I just remember standing in my apartment, staring at the table where her favorite candle used to sit, and realizing it had been gone for weeks, and I never noticed. Maybe that's what stung the most. Not just that she'd emotionally left me a long time ago, but that I'd let her go without a fight, without a question. I was so afraid of losing her that I allowed her to disappear one layer at a time. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone, scrolling through old messages like some desperate archaeologist. Her good morning texts had turned into yep and okay months ago. Her selfies stopped coming entirely. And I had told myself it was just life, just stress, work, routine. But it wasn't. It was detachment. Quiet, surgical detachment. At 4:17 a.m., I opened her laptop. I didn't plan to. I'd never touched it before. But something in me snapped, a whisper that said, "She already left you. What else can she take?" The laptop wasn't password protected. I wish it had been. The first thing I saw was a folder on the desktop titled Work Docs. I opened it without thinking. Inside were files that meant nothing. Spreadsheets, PDFs, pitch decks. All legit. All boring. But in the corner of the screen was a shortcut I'd never noticed before, a link to a cloud drive. It had one folder, named Us. My heart dropped. I clicked it, hoping, stupidly, that maybe she was holding on to our photos, maybe something sentimental. But it wasn't filled with pictures of us. It was pictures of them, him and her, at concerts, on rooftops, in hotel rooms. A video of her blowing out candles on a cake I didn't buy, in a restaurant I'd never been to, sitting on someone else's lap. And then I saw the date on the first file, 6 months ago. We were still sleeping in the same bed. I was still making her lunch for work, still paying rent, still thinking I had time to fix what was broken. My hand shook. I slammed the lid shut and just sat there cold. Not angry, not even sad, just hollow. What broke me wasn't the cheating. It was how happy she looked in those photos, how relaxed, how alive. That joy, that softness in her face, it used to be mine. Now it was his. And I was just the guy paying the bills while they played pretend behind my back. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat in silence and stared at the flickering city lights outside our window. Because deep down, I wasn't shocked. I was ashamed. Ashamed I didn't leave sooner. Ashamed I let her convince me I was the problem. Ashamed that I became so numb I couldn't even recognize betrayal while it slept beside me. The knock came at 8:12 a.m., right as the sun tried to push its way through the city haze. I hadn't slept. I was still sitting on the couch, fully dressed from the night before, staring at nothing with dry eyes and a stomach full of dread. I figured it was a delivery or maybe someone from the building, until I opened the door and saw him. Tall, athletic, smug in a way you don't earn, just inherit. Aviator sunglasses, designer jacket, the kind of man people assume wins without trying. And worst of all, I recognized him. His face was in the folder. He was the man in the photos. The man holding my wife like I never could. The man whose smile was stamped all over my marriage like graffiti on a ruin. "Hey," he said casually, as if we were neighbors or old college friends. "Can we talk?" My throat tightened. I didn't move. I couldn't. But he just stood there, perfectly relaxed, holding a to-go coffee like this was some normal morning meetup. "I'm Tyler," he added, though he had to know I knew that already. Maribel probably didn't want me to come here, but it felt right. Felt right? He glanced past me like he was checking to see if she was home. Then he leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. "Look, man, I didn't know about you at first. Honestly, she told me she was in a dead marriage, that you guys were basically roommates. I figured she was just trying to leave quietly." I almost laughed. Actually, almost. Because the audacity it takes to sleep with someone's wife and then explain yourself at their front door is something I thought only existed in movies. "She's moving in with me," he said, like he was updating my Amazon shipping status. "She just hasn't figured out how to tell you yet." I thought, maybe it'd be easier if I helped clear the air. I still hadn't said a word. Not because I was speechless, but because I was afraid of what I'd say if I let anything out. "You deserve someone who actually wants you," he added. "And she doesn't. She told me that." There it was. The knife twisted, and he handed it to me with a smile. He turned to leave, but before he stepped away, he looked back and said, "No hard feelings, man. You're a good guy. You just weren't her type." That line again. Like it was a universal excuse, like it erased the months of lies, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching stillness of knowing you were never really seen. I closed the door, locked it, then double-locked it. And that's when I collapsed on the floor, shaking. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was humiliation. It was the helplessness of realizing you'd been reduced to a footnote in your own story, a placeholder while she waited for someone shinier. I didn't eat that day, or shower, or check my phone. I sat in that spot on the floor, surrounded by the silence of a life I no longer recognized, wondering how many other people knew, how many friends smiled at me while keeping her secret. How long had I been the joke? But as the hours passed, I realized something else. Something worse. This wasn't about Tyler. It wasn't even about Maribel. It was about me. I had let this happen. I ignored the signs. I silenced my instincts. I let myself be small. And now I had to figure out whether I'd disappear with the mess or finally clean it up. By the third day, my apartment stopped feeling like mine. It wasn't even the emptiness that got to me. It was the sense that everything in it had been staged. The furniture, the photos on the shelves, the candle she once claimed calmed her migraines. They all felt like props in a life that was never mine to begin with. I started seeing details I had never paid attention to before. The way her handwriting on the fridge notes never said "we," only you. The receipts that were always tucked into her purse instead of left on the counter. The small, consistent acts of separation. And somehow, those details felt worse than the affair itself. They revealed that she'd been planning her exit far longer than I realized. But what she didn't plan for, what none of them planned for, was my curiosity finally waking up. I didn't go looking for revenge. I wasn't that kind of man. I didn't want to expose anyone or make a scene. But something in me had changed. I wanted answers, not just about what she'd done, but who she really was. If I was going to be discarded like an unwanted object, I needed to know who I had been thrown away for and by. So I started digging. Not obsessively. Quietly. Carefully. A login she forgot to log out of. An old cloud account synced to my email. I wasn't expecting much. maybe texts, photos, some confirmation of what I already knew. But instead, I found something older. It was a folder named Minnesota. We'd never been to Minnesota. I didn't even know she had ties there. Inside were several documents, some scanned IDs, rental applications, and a court file. My heart dropped as I read through it. A different name, a different address, a restraining order. At first, I thought it was someone she filed against. But no, it was filed against her. 2 years before we even met. The details were vague, but chilling. Harassment, fraud, identity manipulation. The woman who filed the complaint alleged that Maribel, under a different name, had posed as her friend, stolen personal details, and used them to open a credit account. It ended with a court-mandated no-contact order. But there was no conviction, no jail time, just a quiet erasure, a sealed record, and a fresh start. My hands were ice cold. I couldn't look away. I had married a woman who wasn't just unfaithful, she was a shapeshifter. Someone who reinvented herself every few years and disappeared once things got too real. And I was just her next chapter. A few hours later, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called her mother. We'd spoken maybe 3 times in the past 5 years. She always kept things short, polite, distant. But this time, when I said her name, there was a pause. A long one. "She's doing it again, isn't she?" her mother asked. Those 6 words opened a floodgate. According to her, Maribel had done this twice before. Different cities, different men. She'd charm, embed herself into their lives, then vanish once she found something better or something riskier. She never stayed long. She was always restless, always chasing a version of herself that didn't exist. And I was just the next fool to fall in love with a mirage. I ended that call feeling hollow all over again. I wasn't even angry. I was humiliated by how completely I'd been fooled. It was late afternoon when I heard the familiar metallic rattle of the key in the front door. I had almost forgotten that she still had one. The sound cut through the quiet like a slap. I stood up from the couch, heart pounding so loud it felt like it echoed in my teeth. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe a text first, maybe a knock. But she let herself in like nothing happened, like she hadn't vanished into someone else's arms, and sent her new boyfriend to deliver the news of my expiration. Maribel stepped inside wearing a beige coat I didn't recognize and an expression so casual it made me feel insane. She barely looked at me before walking past, heading straight toward the bedroom without a word. No greeting, no apology, not even a fake excuse. Just pure, entitled presence. I stood frozen in the hallway, fists clenched, jaw locked, trying not to combust. After a minute, she came out holding a small box, the wooden one I kept in the back of my closet, buried beneath winter sweaters. I hadn't seen it in years. It was where I used to keep birthday cards, dried rose petals from our first anniversary, and an old keychain she gave me when I got my first promotion. The sentimental junk drawer of our failed marriage. "What are you doing with that?" I asked, my voice drier than sand. She looked at me, finally. "Just getting my things." I stepped forward. "That box doesn't belong to you. I gave you half of what's in it," she replied without flinching. "So I'm taking it back." I could feel the heat rise in my chest. "You gave me those things as gifts. You don't get to collect memories like lost luggage." She rolled her eyes and walked toward the door. "Don't be dramatic, Milo. I'm just trying to leave clean." But there was nothing clean about what she'd done. Nothing honest. And as she reached for the door handle, something in me snapped, not in a violent way, but in a final way. Like a window slamming shut in a storm. "I know about Minnesota," I said quietly. Her hand paused mid-turn. She didn't move, didn't speak. I found the folder. The court file. The name you used before this one. Slowly, she turned back to face me. Her eyes were wide, but not in fear. In recognition. Like she had expected this moment. Maybe even prepared for it, but hoped it wouldn't come. "You went digging," she said. No emotion. Just a statement. I needed to know if anything about you was ever real. She didn't deny it. Didn't cry. Didn't beg. She just looked tired. Like the weight of holding so many identities was finally catching up to her. "You think you're the first?" she asked, almost bitterly. "You're not. But you're the one who kept trying to fix what was never broken. That's why I stayed longer than I should have." I stepped back like she'd slapped me. It wasn't just the words. It was the calm cruelty in them. She didn't say I was a good man. She said I was tolerable. Then why come back? I asked. She held up the box. Because I wanted to keep the part of you that still believed in me. That broke something in me I didn't know was left to break. She opened the door and left. No goodbye, no slam, just silence. I didn't leave the apartment the next day. Not out of depression, though that was there, but out of obsession. I couldn't stop replaying what she said before walking out. I wanted to keep the part of you that still believed in me. That line sank its claws in deeper than any confession could. It made me realize that everything I thought was love might have been performance art. And the worst part? I applauded the entire show. I knew I had to talk to someone who had been closer to her than I ever was. Someone who'd seen the version of her that didn't come with the polished charm she used on me. And there was only one person I could think of, her ex-roommate, Tara. Tara and Maribel had lived together years before we got married. They had a falling out, or at least that's what I was told. Maribel said she moved out because Tara was unstable and toxic. But looking back, I'm not sure if that wasn't just projection. I hadn't spoken to Tara since our wedding, but I still had her number. I stared at it for nearly an hour before texting. Can we talk? It's about her. She responded 5 minutes later. I was wondering when you'd find me. We met at a small cafe across town. She was already sitting at the corner table when I arrived, sipping black coffee and tapping a pen against a paperback. She looked surprised to see me, but not entirely unprepared. I always liked you, Milo, she said as I sat down. You were the only one who didn't pretend to know her. That hit me harder than it should have. I got straight to the point. I told her what I found. About Minnesota, the folder, the man at my door, the box she came to take. Tara didn't flinch. She just nodded slowly, like she was confirming a theory she had kept quiet for too long. She did the same thing to a guy named Cole, she said. Back in Chicago. She told him she was some kind of nonprofit strategist, helped him launch his app, drained his money, then ghosted him. Changed her name, her job title, even her haircut. When I started asking questions, she locked me out of our apartment and disappeared the next day. Why didn't you warn me? I asked, trying not to sound accusatory. I tried. She blocked my number. You think I wanted to see you go through this? I cared about you. But she's good, Milo. She makes you think you're the only one who finally understands her. She mirrors you until you fall in love with a version of yourself, not her. That was the line that stayed with me the most. She mirrors you until you fall in love with a version of yourself. I sat there in silence, wondering if I'd ever actually known the woman I called my wife, or if I'd only known the reflection of my own desperate hopes. There's one more thing, Tara said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed photo, grainy, black and white, clearly from a security camera. Maribel, at an ATM, with someone I didn't recognize. Date stamped 3 weeks before she left me. The account being accessed was mine. She used your identity to open a joint line. It's probably why she never pushed for divorce papers. She needed access. The world didn't go dark. It went quiet. My ears rang, my hands went cold, but I wasn't surprised. Just numb. She hadn't just taken my trust, my dignity, my sense of reality. She'd taken my name, too. Tara touched my hand gently. You're not alone, Milo. She does this to men who are kind. Empathetic. The ones who won't fight back. I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I wasn't throwing dishes or punching walls. That kind of rage burns fast and loud, and then it's gone. No, mine simmered. It was the kind that crept in slowly, twisted around my spine, and started changing the way I breathed. It didn't make me reckless. It made me sharp, focused, because now I understood. This wasn't heartbreak. It was fraud. She hadn't just broken me emotionally. She'd stolen from me, rewritten pieces of my life like an editor with no respect for the author. And there was one person left I hadn't spoken to. The one who stood at my door with a coffee and a smirk and told me to move on like I was yesterday's trash. Tyler. He wasn't just the affair partner. He was part of the machinery. She didn't pick him randomly. He was the next mark. Or maybe the next accomplice. Either way, he knew more than he said. I found him through one of her tagged photos, on a car club forum of all places. Apparently, he was proud of his overpriced convertible and had a custom license plate that matched his Instagram handle. It didn't take long to figure out where he worked. A boutique gym downtown, all black walls and minimalist branding, where trainers wear microphones and pretend they're TED speakers. I didn't make an appointment. I showed up with a gym bag that had nothing in it but old shoes and the weight of everything she did to me. Tyler was at the front desk when I arrived, talking to a woman who laughed too hard at his joke. He froze the second he saw me, like I was a ghost he'd accidentally summoned. "I just need 5 minutes," I said calmly. "Then you'll never see me again." He looked around, then gestured toward the back hallway near the office. We stepped into a storage room that smelled like rubber mats and protein powder. I didn't waste time. "You lied to me," I said. "You said you didn't know she was married. But you did. You had to." He ran a hand through his hair and dropped the act. "Okay, I knew. Not at first, but yeah, eventually." "When?" He hesitated. 3 months before she left you." 3 months. She said you were checked out. Miserable. Controlling. I laughed bitterly. Controlling? She emptied my account and stole my ID. That shut him up. Completely. The smugness vanished. Now he looked nervous. She never told me about that. I pulled out a copy of the bank statement, printed and highlighted. She was pulling cash using an account linked to my name, while sleeping in your bed, still wearing a ring she never took off. He stared at the paper like it might explode. "She's not who you think she is," I said, my voice low. "She's done this before. She'll do it again. You're not the finish line. You're just next." I expected him to deny it, maybe defend her, but he just nodded slowly, eyes unfocused. "She left last night," he said. "Said she needed space. Took my laptop and said she'd be back today. She's not answering her phone." I blinked. "She's gone." "Yeah. Took off with my keys, too." And just like that, I realized what was happening. She was doing it again. She had drained me. Now she'd begun draining him. And somewhere out there, she was already becoming someone new. A new name, new smile, new victim. I didn't chase her. Not this time. No more searching through her accounts. No more tracing her movements. No more trying to understand someone who made it her life's work to be untraceable. The woman I thought I married was never real. Just a temporary version she wore until it stopped being convenient. And finally, I accepted that her departure wasn't a loss. It was an escape for me. A week after confronting Tyler, I filed a police report. Not out of revenge, but out of principle. With the documents Tara helped me recover and the bank statements in hand, I sat across from an officer and told the full truth, unfiltered. Fraud, identity theft, and everything in between. I didn't care if they found her. I just wanted her trail on record. Not for me, but for the next version of Milo she'd try to rewrite. Then, I packed a single duffel bag and drove 4 hours north to my brother's cabin. No phone service. No Wi-Fi. Just firewood, a slow-burning stove, and silence that didn't feel like punishment. For the first time in years, I woke up without a knot in my stomach. I cooked meals just for myself. Read books with cracked spines. Watched the sun dip below the trees without checking the time. It didn't fix me, but it reminded me that I still existed outside of her shadow. Eventually, I returned home, not to rebuild what we had, but to start something that was mine from the ground up. I sold the apartment, closed every joint account. I even changed my name back to my full first name, Emerson. It sounds small, but it felt like reclaiming something. I stopped being the nice guy who gets stepped on. I became a man who knew how to stand still and mean it. Maribel never came back. But I got one final message, an unmarked envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a photo of the box she took from my closet. It was burned. On the back, in her handwriting, "No souvenirs." I smiled. Because she finally did something honest. I don't need souvenirs either. What I lived through isn't a scar, it's a scarlet flag. A warning, a lesson, and strangely, a gift. I'm no longer the man who lets people chip away at him until nothing's left. I am someone who knows how to leave the table when love is no longer served. And that's worth everything she tried to steal. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments. What's a moment in history or your own life that completely changed how you saw the world? Maybe it was personal. Maybe it was global. Either way, we want to hear from you. Thanks for being part of this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions, where the truth always finds a way out.